He said, so we don't need to worry about showing arrangements, he says, because I want to price this at a price that it's not going to attract any interest. He said, I don't actually want to sell it. I don't even want you to show it. I just need to prove to the bank that it's on the market for sale so that I can write out the mortgage. And my mom and I just looked at each other and we said, so you're saying that you'd like us to list your property, that you'd like us to do the work, but not sell it.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Interlux Auctions, your solution to guarantee competitive offers on your luxury listings with no compromise to commission. Visit Interlux.com today to find out more. That's INTERLUXE.com.
Okay. Welcome to A State of Mind, a podcast series all about motivating, inspiring, and educating you in the art of selling luxury real estate. The podcast is brought to you by the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. I'm Tami Sims, lead trainer for the Institute and a full-time real estate professional in St. Petersburg, Florida for more than 2 decades. In today's episode, we're going to talk about some of the biggest mistakes that luxury real estate agents make and how to avoid them. I'm here with my co-host, Jack Miller, a 25-plus year veteran luxury agent with Onward Real Estate in the greater Nashville, Tennessee market. Jack, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Good to see you too, Tami.
I'm kind of excited about this particular topic. I think we've alluded to some of these things in other podcast episodes that we've done. But I'm really excited to just kind of take a deeper dive down this path. And everybody loves an outtake, right? The B-roll. So I think that's kind of where we're going to go. Tell me, what came to mind when this topic first presented? Was there one thing that stuck out at you?
Yeah, there actually was. We're talking about mistakes that agents make. And it's interesting timing, Tami, because right now we are, as of recent, empty nesters. And so we're in the process of being buyers ourselves in our market. And so now when I'm making appointments to show properties, and typically, or very often, I should say, on listings that we're seeing, agents are present. And so I'm experiencing looking at real estate through the eyes of the buyer, because we're the buyers, and not just the eyes of the broker. And so just this week, we had the experience of, I called to make an appointment, and the agent, who I've not heard of before, and he may be a terrific agent, but I've never seen him working in the luxury market before. He immediately on the phone started pitching all the features of the home, everything I can see right on the MLS, nothing that's new to me, pitching numbers of rooms and bathrooms and square footage and all the things and the things I can see in the photos. But what he wasn't doing was asking me what we're looking for and what was important. And it was so interesting because what is important, this is a more of an urban in-town home. And so we're very interested in things like walkability and the park that's nearby and how long it takes to get there and what restaurants and coffee shops. I know the general area of town, but I don't know it very well. And so I'm much more interested in all those details and the streetscape and everything because the house we're going to see. But he jumped right into pitching home features, and what he wasn't doing was talking about the lifestyle that was afforded by living on this particular street and what things were close by. It was interesting. It was I was seeing it definitely through the eyes of the buyer.
And I have always said that those of us, I've always said that those of us in the industry ought to be buyers and sellers every once in a while so that we remind ourselves of what it feels like. But I'm so glad that you said that. It actually happened to me just a few days ago when I was making an appointment to show a property, and it was a couple of $1 million. And sure enough, the agent, when they were confirming it by text, sent me pages and pages and pages of reiteration of what was in the MLS. And you're absolutely right. It was all brick and mortar and very little about the lifestyle. And there is a golden lesson for all of our listeners and viewers in that when you are marketing luxury properties, you're marketing the lifestyle far more than any of the brick and mortar. I think that's a critical thing.
Absolutely.
So,
We just did a broker open today, just this morning, on a new off market listing that we have, and it's in the $2+ million price range, and for this part of town, certainly a luxury property, and it's a neighborhood that is well sought after because of the school zone. So people who have school age kids want to be here. They have large yards, but what's interesting about this property is that it's got a gorgeous outdoor living space, very adult oriented. Okay. But you can walk from the front porch, literally less than 2 minute walk, and be at the community playground, the community pool, the rec center, access to the greenway. The greenway, which is like a paved walkway, goes on for miles and miles throughout Williamson County, where kids can rollerblade, ride bikes, ride scooters, all this kind of thing. And you can get to the library and our family YMCA, the soccer park, all these things in literally 5 minutes. And so in promoting this property, we focus heavily on those aspects of the home because that is the lifestyle for the buyer seeking that kind of property. Yes, they can see it's a gorgeous property. Yes, it's completely renovated top to bottom, but that's the things they can see on the MLS and they can see in person. But I want to make sure they understood the life. What's it like living here? And so we pushed hard on that with our broker open, particularly with the agents who weren't as familiar with the area.
excellent. And that makes me think we can take that in another direction as well. So often when we are working with a buyer client, particularly one that maybe is relocating from out of the area, we tend to focus on, okay, what are the specifications that you need? And instead we should be asking, what kind of lifestyle are you looking to live? What kind of things do you like to do in your spare time? That sort of thing that don't fall in the category of ordinary real estate sales. And how critical is that?
Well, yeah, and a lot of times I think, Tammy, a lot of times we assume because it's a higher end purchase, and typically we're dealing with a much more sophisticated public from a business standpoint because they bought and sold many homes typically prior to the transaction we're working with. We assume that they know exactly what they're looking for, and that may be the case. But oftentimes in the luxury market, it's no different than any other type of home purchase. Sometimes the buyer thinks they know what they're looking for, but they may not, particularly if they're relocating to a new area because they don't really know what they're choosing from and they don't know exactly what questions to ask. Now, I'll give you a good example. I have a buyer that recently closed, I say recently, a few months ago, closed on a property, a $5 million property here in our market. And when I first met this couple, they were relocating from Southern California. And they told me they were looking for a high-rise condo and that their mother, one of them had their mother living with them. And so they needed a large square footage high-rise condo. And they started giving me all the parameters they were looking for as far as amenities. And so when we met, that's where the search started. But as we were looking at properties, I started asking which view is important. What type of view are they looking for? And the more I started asking questions, what I came to realize was they didn't really care much. It wasn't about the view. And that's very unusual for a high-rise condo purchase. Usually, if they're looking at a high-rise condo, it's all about the view. They want to see water. They want to see a skyline. They want to see something, a sunset, a sunrise. There's something they want to see. But the view is not important. So the more I asked questions, I realized it wasn't about the view, and it really wasn't about the amenities. It was about a comfortable space where the mother felt safe when they weren't there, that they had a lock and leave travel type of situation, convenience and walkability and convenience to certain types of nightlife and that sort of thing. And the more we talked, I realized it wasn't really a condo they were looking for. It's just a condo seemed to be the easy answer. And the more I asked questions, the more I realized there's a lot of options out there in our market that give you the same feel of a condo. In other words, here, that would be something that offered more square footage for the money, more room for mom, more privacy for them and for mom, with a home with an elevator, for example. The elevator in the condo is a big deal because she can't do steps, but an elevator in a private home also solves another problem, which is gives her the ability to be on a different floor, and that was a big deal to them. And they ended up purchasing a home that wasn't a condo at all. It was a single family home, but we had to ask enough questions to help get them to the right lifestyle they were truly looking for, and they assumed it had to be a condo.
I love that. And it's a perfect example of a mistake that a lot of agents make. Number one, not asking the right questions. And number two, trying to fit square pegs in round holes
Mhm.
when you're not paying attention to the signs that you're getting from your clients along the way that tell you
Mhm.
that something has shifted.
Well, I want to say too, when I'm expressing myself in the way that we do that, kind of narrowing the focus, if there are agents out here who are having aha moments and saying, "Gosh, I didn't think about it that way." Tammy, you and I weren't always that smart. I mean, I
Oh,
can
we were
remember early in my career when I stumbled a bunch and went about it. It's truly about the features and the square footage and the bedrooms. Because I think we're programmed that way, and the reason is because early on we focus on learning how to use the MLS and all the online platforms to do searches and to look for things. And it's a hunt, but it's an entirely different mindset putting together a home search on social media or on the platforms like that we use, like the MLS, versus conversing with our client to understanding the person and the lifestyle. And those are
Yeah,
two very different things. But when you start, oftentimes in our careers early on, we focus on how to use the tools, but we
yeah,
don't focus on the kind of almost the counseling aspect of it, which is understanding the client and understanding their needs. And we're
yeah.
much more successful in the luxury space focusing on that truly first and then narrowing down into the search rather than the other way
That's
around.
right. That's absolutely right. And that makes me think of the fact that um, what we need to be addressing now, number one, we have to be paying attention to things that change, is that there are savvy buyers that are using AI to search for property
Mhm,
based on lifestyle, proximity to
mhm,
recreation, to cultural things. And so they have also abandoned the tools that allow them
mhm.
to plug in bedrooms and baths. And so our marketing needs to adapt to that to be able to be easily found by those folks that are using that kind of search methodology.
And it's a very different world in real estate in the way we search and everything else than it was 20 years ago, no doubt. And then you also have the other part of that too is that sometimes we find ourselves working. We've talked about this on the podcast before, where we're working with a buyer who is suddenly launched into a uh, new price range and a new bracket
Yeah,
altogether because they are, for example, a professional athlete. Maybe they're not bought a home at all, like you said. Maybe a first time home purchase, because a professional athlete or an entertainer. And we've had purchases like that before where we've worked with somebody who went from being a college student and living in rental properties and suddenly they're buying a $4 or $5 or $6 million home and it's their first purchase. Or an entertainer who's been doing, they've been doing gigs, as we call them, music gigs, and suddenly have a major record deal. They've had some hits, they got the money coming in, and they're making a comparable purchase. But the last home they sold was 300,000. Now they're looking at 6 million. This happens, and so now we're dealing with they don't have the experience, but then also they're typically partnered with other business professionals, and we have to work with all of them to
yeah.
help put the whole package together. So you're dealing with the business manager, or the general manager, or there's the attorney. There's a number of people who might be doing the wealth manager, the wealth advisor. But there's all kinds of people we deal with in putting that decision together.
And so there again is another common mistake of not finding out ahead of time who the other players might be in a transaction,
Hmm.
right? And then that gets
That's
down
right.
to the nuance of communication styles, right? We teach this in the training, asking the question early on, as you make this decision, is there anyone that you're going to be seeking advice and counsel from so that you can engage them? And
Hmm.
the
Right.
end user client may have a very different personality and wherewithal than some of the players. Let's take the financial advisor, right? You're going to need to communicate with all of those individuals in the transaction in a very different way in order to
Hmm.
have a cohesive end result.
Well,
And
I've
don't,
had folks in the sports world, Tammy, that would say, the player who is our client is telling us, this is the price range. Here's what I want, and the business manager is saying, yeah, he's right or she's right about the price range or whatever. But what's really important to the business manager is a property that can flip because they know they could potentially be traded in a short period of time, and they don't want a property that will be hard to resell in 2 years. So they said, yes, obviously listen to their lifestyle needs, but on
yep,
top of everything else, make sure it's something they can flip easily in 2 years because we don't want that kind of financial hindrance should they get traded.
I had that same conversation this week with clients that I was showing properties to. But his biggest concern, and he articulated that to me, is that it's something that they can turn when the time is right, that they're
Right.
not going to sit on. So you hit the nail on the head there, in that sometimes you have to consider those additional factors more so than just what somebody wants in the here and now.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
Well, and,
And
and I think on the lifestyle thing too, it's very interesting because if agents don't ask those types of questions, Tammy, if we don't ask the right questions leading into all this, what ends up happening is we're showing houses based on features. We're talking about features. And a lot of times buyers are not liking certain homes or condos we're showing them. And we're not understanding why they're not resonating. And oftentimes they don't even know why they're not resonating unless we understand the whole picture. Then you get a good feel for what's going to work better in the future.
yeah,
Um, and also, as we're doing, I know you've done this and we do this, and so many of our colleagues do, we do off market searches.
hmm,
What else do you have that fits these parameters? And so you do talk about price point, square footage, general area of town, but very quickly adding in, we're looking for things like walkability.
yeah,
Is there a marina nearby? Can you walk to the marina? Or, what are the key lifestyle points for the buyer? Is it walkability to schools?
yeah.
There's all sorts of things, but that's understanding the lifestyle needs.
Yeah. And, that makes me think of another big mistake that a lot of realtors make, especially those that are in the upper tier or have gotten there, is not spending the time to build the relationships with the other luxury real estate professionals
Hmm.
in order to have access to those
Hmm.
off market features
That's right.
and attending broker events and that sort of thing, and having those relationships to be able to pick up the phone and say, I have a client with this kind of need. Do you have anything? And for us to have seen every property that we could, right? You said you had a
Mhm.
broker's event earlier
Yep.
today,
Yep.
right? Well, I think you would agree with me, and I think we've said it before, that the best way to get other brokers to attend your events is
Yep.
to attend
And
theirs,
theirs. That's exactly right. Yeah.
right? And it's a huge mistake. A lot of people will not take the time to go to others, and then they get frustrated when nobody comes to theirs.
We've mentioned that before also with new agents or agents who are new to the luxury space is using that as a vehicle for establishing the camaraderie, establishing the relationships throughout the industry, even though they may not yet have buyers looking in that price range. They still need to understand the market. If you aspire to work in the luxury market where you live or near where you live, and you want to be able to sell that type of property, you need to understand it. And the best
Yep.
way to understand it is to visit those properties. And by visiting those properties, you're making and building relationships with other agents. There's agents in our marketplace that come routinely to broker opens, and I know what their numbers are. I see what they're selling, and they're not selling it yet, but I know they will be. I
Yeah.
can look at them, talk to them, and I've done this long enough, and you've done this long enough. We've seen agents make that leap and do it successfully and do it really, really well. There's a young man that comes to mind to me right now. He's probably, early 30s. And I've been watching him over the last 5 years. And 5 years ago, he started doing that, attending all the broker open houses, establishing relationships. He went after this thing, with like a mission that this is where he wanted to be. And he now has listings in the luxury market, in our luxury market, and is doing really well because he made it a focus. He laser focused on that was his goal. And he's become a really good counselor in luxury real estate because he understands the neighborhoods and the spaces and who the other players are, because he's made it a point to be known and to get to know folks there
Yeah,
or here.
absolutely. And that makes me think too about the importance of understanding the features and amenities and level of finishes that you see in the upper tier. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to operate in that space, it's a huge mistake not to spend the time to get to know and understand what the expectation is, right? Because one of the biggest mistakes that I think everybody was expecting we'd say is taking a listing that's overpriced, right? Or not, a big mistake is overpricing something, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so part of that comes back to your knowledge of the quality of the finishes and understanding, landscaping, outdoor kitchens, when all of those features make a difference. And Jack, I have to tell you that my favorite story of yours is about the buyer's agent who toured your listing with the kitchen.
Oh
And
yeah.
I wonder if you do me a favor and please tell that story again, because even anybody who's heard it before, it's worth hearing again. And it absolutely falls into the category of biggest mistakes
Are
to
you,
avoid.
are you talking about kitchen appliances?
I am.
Yes, yeah. We were touring a home that was a $15 million listing, and the agent who had the listing was way outside of her lane with this listing, and she was telling us about the kitchen and all the wonderful features. And she said, look at this stove. This stove is beautiful. Look at the red knobs. Aren't the red knobs really cool? And she was talking about a Wolf range. Well, all Wolf ranges.
Yeah.
That's their brand. They have red knobs. You recognize them immediately for that feature. But she was talking about as if we'd never seen this before, and it immediately immediately showed me she doesn't understand the product that she was selling. And in fairness, she was a really terrific agent. I want to be very clear about this. She was a terrific agent. She was a commercial agent that stepped out to do a luxury listing because she had an established relationship with the seller, but she did not understand luxury real estate and did not understand residential real estate. And so she
Mm.
struggled. But if you don't understand the product, you don't understand what you're selling, it shows quickly. You reveal your hand very quickly.
Yeah.
So again, going back to the new agents or agents who are maybe your experienced, but now making that jump into luxury, you can learn the product and learn the communities, the neighborhoods, the houses, the streets, the features you see in homes without ever selling anything, by being visible, by being present. And then when the opportunity presents itself, you'll be a good resource for your clients, and have a much greater shot at picking up a luxury buyer or a luxury seller.
Yep. Now that takes me to the topic of the mistake of taking a listing that isn't the right fit,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not going to be able to service appropriately and isn't the best use of your time and isn't the best service to your client, right? When
Yeah,
you said a
for sure.
commercial agent that stepped out to take this luxury listing, whether it's a favor, whatever, whether it's motivated by, a nice paycheck, but I can think of times when I have taken a listing that wasn't the right fit, and I quickly knew it. And then you have to have the courage to give it back, and then over time you have to be able to develop the knowledge of
Mm-hmm.
when it's the right thing and the courage to say no, especially in the upper tier if it is a beautiful price tag.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can picture yourself having to drive 3 hours to service the property, and it's way outside your comfort zone, if the seller is demanding unreasonable attention, if you will. There was one person who wanted me to come every 3 days with a 45-minute drive to change the flowers. And I knew right at that moment, I said, this is just the icing on the cake of what this relationship is gonna feel like. And so I politely declined. And I have to tell you that when you turn down a luxury listing, sellers are blown away. And in some cases, they will almost beg, right? They're not used to being told no. They're used to
Right.
people fighting over them. So it's a really interesting space to be.
But
Yeah.
you know, there's other things, Tammy, and I think you were starting to allude to this earlier. There's other things that happen where um, we know it's not the right fit because maybe the sellers are terrific and is a good. It could be a terrific relationship, but we don't understand the product. We don't understand the property. And I'll tell you something that comes to mind. We had of course, we're not a waterfront market like you are, but we have
Right.
water in our market. We have lakes and rivers, of course, and we have lakefront properties and riverfront properties. And our waterfront properties are unique here compared to some places in that our waterfront is what happens on the waterfront is dictated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Years. I'm
So
very well
if you own
acquainted.
property on a river or on a lake here, or there's some lakes, for example, you can't even own. You can own a lot, but you don't. You can't even clear the woods where the water is. You can't even get to the water. In some places, they won't even let you have lots on the water. But there are lakes where you can have lots on the water, but you can't build a dock or build a pier. We don't even do piers. They don't do piers in our market. It has to be a dock, no piers, and that's because of the guidelines of the Corps of Engineers. And I had an agent I was dealing with that did not understand that, and he was selling property as waterfront, build your own dock, blah blah blah, and you can't get a dock permit. And he was promoting it that way because he didn't understand. He doesn't understand enough about the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the way they oversee property. And it's a really big deal, and it definitely has an impact on the value of property, whether or not you can have a dock, of course. So anyway, it's important that you understand what it is you're selling, and if you know you're getting outside your lane, you're getting out of your wheelhouse, so to speak. So there are times that bring in somebody else, either do a
Yeah.
co-list or refer it to somebody, and there's no shame in that. Let's get somebody who can do the best job on the property. You know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I've had several conversations recently with sellers who were lovely, but the property that they were selling, I didn't know anything about, right? I
Hmm.
don't know what restaurants are nearby. I don't know what the closest grocery store is, right?
Hmm.
I'm not going to do the best job of marketing your property. And add to that, it's a drive, that sort of thing. So so I definitely would encourage all of our listeners to be mindful about that and not make the mistake of taking listings that aren't the right fit. And when
Hmm.
you know that something isn't right, and letting a client go. I know
Hmm.
that's happened to me several times, and I am so much better about it now. So much
Okay.
better. Yeah. I remember. It's funny. I think that my mom figured that out a long time before I did. Of course, she had a lot more years in the business by the
Sure.
time I
Yeah.
came along.
Yeah.
I
With age comes
remember
wisdom, right?
she and I went to That's right. So she and I went to visit with a seller. This was in the short sale era, right?
Fun.
So, I mean, every piece of business was hard right then. Every piece of business was hard. And I remember visiting we had had some phone conversations. This was someone who was referred to us by a trusted somebody in our sphere of influence. We filled out all the listing paperwork, and it was a secondary condo that he owned, a nice, waterfront vacation condo. It wasn't his primary residence. And so we had done all the paperwork, and I remember that I was being so prepared that I had already initialed and signed our side of the listing paperwork, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And we sat at the table and we talked about the process and all of that. And he said out loud, he said, so we don't need to worry about showing arrangements, he says, because I want to price this at a price that it's not going to attract any interest. He said, I don't actually want to sell it. I don't even want you to show it. I just need to prove to the bank that it's on the market for sale so that I can write out the mortgage. And my mom and I just looked at each other and we said, so you're saying that you'd like us to list your property, that you'd like us to do the work, but not sell it. And that's not the business that we are in. And I grabbed that paperwork back as quickly as I could. And I will tell you, I have never, ever again signed our side of the paperwork before the other side, and
Right.
before we were ready. That
That's not
sort
a
of,
good business plan to put property in the market that's not going to sell.
yeah, no, that is definitely it. Or, another mistake is just marketing a property to the wrong audience.
Hmm.
Right. Again, we go back to different lifestyles, do
Yeah.
a different marketing piece, a different cover letter, a different description to speak to that audience. Right. So often I think we think it's just one and done.
Yeah, and that's also where you mentioned AI earlier, and that is coming more and more into the real estate conversation. You know, that's a terrific way to use AI as a tool, is to write your description and then say to ChatGPT or whichever Claude or whatever you're using, and say, okay, I want to appeal to the golf community, or I want to appeal to people in the horse community, or I want to whatever. How would you view this listing description or this marketing piece, whatever? And it's very interesting, some of the responses you get, and so quickly, which is really amazing. But some of the responses you get that will say, hey, this looks really good, but you need to focus more on this.
Yeah.
Make this the highlight. And I wouldn't use this phrase, this terminology, blah, blah. I think I have a pretty good command of the English language, particularly written better than spoken. I write well, and I've generally done really good listing descriptions and marketing pieces as far as the drafts. But I'll tell you, I've been very impressed with how AI can take what I come off or start with as a base and really polish it and make it more focused toward, because we'll talk about with AI, we'll talk about the audience we're trying to reach. And that's where we always start too. You don't start with what you're selling. You start with who we trying to appeal to. And then
Exactly.
how do we present it to them?
So,
Yeah.
gosh, so many different things that we could talk about, and yet we are coming to the end of our time. Is there any last thought that you have about, as we're talking about biggest mistakes and how to avoid them?
Well, I think the thought that I've expressed this earlier, the first thought I have is that we all make them,
Yeah,
and don't beat yourself up, because in this industry or in any industry, early on in the industry you are, the more likely you are to make mistakes. Just know it's going to happen and learn from it. I have had some wonderful opportunities come from mistakes I've made, and just gotten smarter the next time around. And so sometimes when I try to offer a pearl of wisdom, if you will, it's not because I'm the smart guy in the room. It's because I was the guy that made the mistake 20 years ago, and I have learned from it. I want to make sure I share it with everybody else so they don't trip over the same thing I did. Um,
absolutely.
and I tell new agents that all the time, and newer agents in the luxury market as well, is I'll share with them some of the things they can do that I hope that will help them jumpstart their business in the luxury market here, by avoiding some of the pitfalls I've ran into early on.
And quite honestly, if we had to cover all the mistakes that agents make, including ourselves, it would be a never-ending podcast. But
Mm.
for now, I'm going to thank all of you so much for joining us on this episode of A State of Mind, the art of selling luxury real estate. If you're interested in learning more about the Institute, you can find more at luxuryhomemarketing.com. And if you like what you just heard, please share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. So if you've if you've got a hot topic that you'd like us to discuss in a future podcast, feel free to let us know. Send an email to info@luxuryhomemarketing.com. Thanks so much for listening.